All right, hey there, Darin Garman here, and we're going to go over really the 4 or 5 key things you want to do to avoid making any kind of financial mistakes when it comes to investing in an apartment property, multifamily property. Now, this has to do with whether you're going to be a landlord and manage and run your own property, maybe you're going to be a passive investor, you're going to be part of a partnership, large or small. What we're really going to cover here is going to help you either if you're a hands-on or hands-off kind of investor and you've identified multifamily properties as the go-to place for at least some of your money, whether it's regular IRA or even 401k money. Let's talk about the things that you want to do to avoid making some mistakes. And what we're going to cover is going to save you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, and probably by either saving you're going to make that or you're going to make that kind of money based on what we're going to cover here today. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's just go ahead and let's label this. Let's go ahead and just label this mistakes. Okay, to avoid. All right, let's just do that. We'll just go ahead and we'll go mistakes to avoid. All right, so number one, and this one's probably the most important thing, but not a lot of people pay attention to this, and that is working with an expert, not a salesperson. Okay, not a salesperson. Okay, so that's number one. Working with an expert, not a salesperson. Now, bottom line here is you want to be working with someone that's been there, done that. You don't want to be working with someone that's just in the process or in the business of selling whatever you're looking at. Okay, so for example, let's say you're a multifamily investor. You want to go buy your first or your next apartment building. Okay, and more than likely you're probably going to engage the services, in many cases, of a real estate agent or a real estate broker. Okay, you don't want to be engaging the services of a real estate agent or broker that has never sold an apartment building or in a 25-year career sold like 3. Okay, bad idea. You want to get the market specialist, the expert in the market to be helping you, working with you, representing you, and getting the best deal. Why? You'll make a hell of a lot more money if you do that, because they'll be able to help you in more ways than you can count, and you want those services of an expert, not a salesperson. Okay, so that's number one. Expert, you use an expert, not a salesperson. That also is the case with partnerships. Okay, do you want to be joining or getting involved in a partnership on, I don't know, let's say it's a 100-unit property. Do you want to get involved in that partnership and the person that is putting the partnership together has not owned any multifamily real estate before, has not managed it before, doesn't have any experience, okay, or limited, or maybe they've got a friend that they know that may be good at it. You see what I mean? Okay, you want to make sure you're dealing with experts, okay? You're not dealing with salespeople. There's a big difference. The other difference that you'll find, by the way, and I get this question all the time, is kind of a little sidebar to this, are books. Okay, so like investment books, podcasts, webinars, all right, so those kinds of things, okay. Who do you listen to? Who do you pay attention to? Whose advice do you take? Well, do you take the advice of the salesperson that's doing this, or do you take advice of the experts that's doing this? Okay, so pretty self-explanatory there. That's number one. All right, let's go to number two. Number two, this is a biggie. This is a biggie. And it's 2 words. Think resale. Okay? Think resale. So you may be thinking, that's kind of a weird thing to be discussing or thinking about when I'm buying something. Why would I be thinking about selling it? Well, that's the first thing you should be thinking of, because someday you're going to want to sell this, right? Or someday somebody's going to sell it, whether you own it yourself, run and manage it yourself, have a management company, or you're part of a real estate investment partnership. It doesn't really matter. You want to be thinking resale. Is this property that I'm getting involved in? Is this fund I'm getting involved in as a passive investor? Is this property I plan on purchasing and owning and running myself or having a management company? Am I going to be able to sell it for a profit in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? What do I think? All things being equal, is this a good deal for me later on? Not just now, not just based on the information I see now, not what's been happening over the last year or 2 years, but what can happen in the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Okay? Those are the things you want to be thinking of. So you want to be thinking resale here. And by the way, if the answer to this is, well, I don't really know. I mean, it's just not making a lot of sense 3 to 5 years from now. Let me give you an example on what I mean. So let's say you're buying a 24-unit property. Okay, and here's what you find out about the 24-unit property. You find out that there have been 60 police calls to this property in the last 2 months. Okay, you find out as you drive the neighborhood, there's lots of vacant commercial buildings. Okay, so there's some office buildings, there's some shopping centers, they're vacant, some windows broken, properties need repair, maintenance, etc. You got vacant commercial going on around. Okay, and then not only that, but the neighboring properties. Okay, neighboring properties are in poor condition. Okay, poor condition. The neighboring properties are. So neighboring properties are in poor condition, and grass is tall, windows are broken, paint's peeling, shingles are falling off. So you see this, you see what's going on here. What do you think the resale of that's going to be? It's going to be terrible, right? More than likely. So this is something you want to be thinking about. Now, on the other hand, if you take a look at that 24-unit property and you've got a shopping center behind it that's fully occupied, okay, parking lots full of cars, properties around there look great, people are driving by like crazy to get from one destination to the next, so you've got really good arterial access, so you've got those things going on, okay. Well, that kind of tells you, your resale probably isn't going to be too bad, all things being equal. But bottom line is you want to be thinking about that now and looking at that now. Okay? You don't want to be thinking of, I'll worry about that in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. You want to be thinking about that right now. Okay? So, number one, work with an expert, not a salesperson. Okay? Number two, make sure you think resale before you invest. And by the way, if you're investing in like a partnership and you're from out of state, you're not from around there, you can still do some investigative work and find stuff out. I mean, that's not hard to do. I mean, with a computer in front of you, you can find almost anything out. Plus, you need to be asking questions. What's going on in the neighborhood? What's happening within a half-mile radius, 1 mile radius? How are the businesses doing? What kind of police calls are there? So you can find all this stuff out. And you should, by the way, you should be doing that. Okay, so what's number three? Okay, you want to avoid the sure thing. Okay, avoid the sure thing. Okay, so what do I mean by that? If it's too good to be true, it is going to be too good to be true. So I'll give you an example. I see this a lot, by the way, which is why this is number 3 on my list. Okay. A property that is projecting huge returns, huge income streams, all right? Let's say huge double-digit returns, let's say 20, 30%. Let's say huge income streams coming from the property. And let's say little downside risk as a result. Does that sound like heaven to you? Kind of sounds like heaven to me. So I got hardly any risk. I'm getting double-digit returns that are huge, and I got all this money coming in from income. Perfect. Sounds like an infomercial, doesn't it? Right? Well, look, if it's too good to be true, you avoid the sure thing because it's going to be too good to be true. So when you get information from someone maybe promoting a property, maybe a partnership opportunity, when you get information for maybe a specific property that you're looking at buying, maybe a real estate agent or broker has sent you some information, maybe you've looked at some information online, whatever. If the results, the numbers are what I call off the charts, and it looks like a sure thing, that should raise this thing right here. By the way, that's a flag. That should raise a flag. Okay, what's going on with this thing? Why is it doing so well? What's the story? You want to find that out. You don't want to be thinking, holy crap, I got really lucky today. I found the sure thing. No such thing. So when you look at a project where it looks almost too good to be true, or even too good to be true. You need to find out why. Let me give you a quick example. So, had an investor that contacted me and was going to get involved in one of our partnerships. It was a 168 unit property that we were going to be purchasing, and he was kind of going back and forth between that and buying something in another state, I believe in Tennessee somewhere. It was like a 4-unit building for something like $13,000. Okay, so he decided 4-unit building, $13,000, and each of those apartments rented for $500 a month. So it doesn't take long for us to do the quick mental math that's a pretty good return on $13,000 investment, right? So he decided to invest in that and buy that $13,000 building. Well, there are properties that no matter how much you pay, even if it's zero, you wish you would have never bought them because of how much time, effort, energy, and money they will cost owning them. That's what he found out. Okay, so after he bought it, there was $5,000 in heating and cooling repairs. City came in and did an inspection. The city folks came in and did a housing inspection. They wanted another $15,000 worth of repairs. Okay, and then in addition to that, he had some foundation work that needed to be done. It was optional, but while he was doing all of this work, they were saying you better do this work too, otherwise it will cost more to get it done. That was $17,000. Okay, so all of a sudden this $13,000 investment, right, turns into, I don't know, $40,000, $50,000. Okay, over 50 grand. And because of where it's located, he is dealing with the kinds of residents that are tearing up the property, that are not being respectful to the property, and unfortunately he's got more cost in energy and effort in management in owning this, when if he just would have avoided the sure thing, he wouldn't even be having these conversations and these heartburn problems. Okay, so number 3 was avoid the sure thing. Make sure you do. Okay. Related to that, number 4, who you work with and what they say. Okay, what they say. And what I mean is lost money. Okay, lost money. What do I mean by lost money? This really applies more towards who you decide to work with when it comes to investing in a real estate partnership. Whether it's a sponsor, whether it's a manager of an LLC, heck, whether it's a friend of yours or an acquaintance that's maybe starting a partnership and they're going to purchase a 72-unit building or something. Okay, the thing you want to ask them, and I get asked this all the time, by the way, which I should and I better be, is have you ever lost money in anything, especially real estate? So have you lost money in real estate? Have you ever purchased a property that's lost money? Have you ever owned a business that's lost money? Have you ever been involved in any kind of venture that's lost money? Okay. Now, specifically for us real estate folks, especially when it comes to multifamily, we want to know, have you ever lost money with any apartments? Apartment projects, we'll just call it. Okay. Have you ever lost money with any apartment projects? Okay. By the way, the answer that you're looking for here is not no. The answer is not no. The answer is hell yes, I have. Yes, I have. Okay? Why do you want someone that's lost money? Because that tells you 2 things, actually 3. Right? What that tells you, so you want hell yes, I've lost money, because it tells me 3 things. Number 1, this person's got experience. Okay? Experience. Do you think that the daily operations of any kind of apartment property venture are going to go smoothly, crystal clear every single day, and there won't be any issues or problems? Right? You want somebody with experience with this. If someone has lost money in a deal, they know what to avoid, they know what to look for, and they know what to do when the proverbial shit hits the fan. Right? That's what you want. Okay? That's one reason, number 1. Okay, number 2 is, again, experience. But related to it this way. They have owned property, and we're talking about apartments now, before. They own property before. Okay? So if someone has lost money in an apartment property venture, they've owned it before. You want to be working with someone that's owned it before. Okay? Well, why is that important? Because when people say that they've never lost money, there's no way that's the case. There's no way. Okay? So if you're looking at someone that, let's say, owns a portfolio of 700 apartment units, 100 apartment units, 70 apartment units, it doesn't really matter. Okay? But if they tell you and go out of their way to tell you that, you know what, I've never lost money on a deal. I've never lost money on a deal. That means two things, unfortunately. Okay, number one, they don't have any experience. Because anyone that has done enough investment deals, doesn't really matter, apartments, stocks, bonds, mutual, whatever it is. I mean, hell, Warren Buffett has lost money. Okay, ask him about Lehman Brothers. Okay, Warren has lost money. Anyone that has a lot of experience and has dealt with multiple investments over periods of years has gotten into a stinker, right? It's just kind of the law of averages. They've gotten into a bad one. And obviously they did not foresee a bad one happening, but they got into a bad one. That's going to happen. It's just kind of the law of averages. Some investments are just not going to work out. Okay? So if someone tells you, I've never lost money, they're either lying to you or they don't have the experience. They're either lying or they don't have the experience. Okay. Keep this in mind always when you're looking at property. Same goes with looking at properties to buy on your own. Maybe you're going to be your own landlord, you're going to have property manager, you're going to oversee management, whatever the case is there. When you're talking with the seller or the seller's agent and they're saying that the property's never had a bad month, has never lost money during a certain period of time. Once again, they're either doing one of two things here. Okay? One of two things. And it kind of loops back to too good to be true that we're talking about there. But just keep your antenna up when it comes to that. All right, let me give you a couple more that's going to really help you out here. All right? Let's talk about the type of property to avoid. Let's do that because that's a big one. So we're going to talk about the type of property. So, the type of property you want to avoid is pretty easy actually. Is you want to avoid anything and everything that's not originally built as an apartment building. You want to avoid those. I'm going to give you one exception here in just a minute. But if it wasn't constructed and built to be an apartment property, you don't want to own it. All right? You don't want to own it. If it's, so for example, converted houses. So if it was a 4-story Victorian style home built in 1930 and it's been converted into 22 sleeping rooms and now they're all rented out by the week, you want to run away from that property as fast as you can. You don't want to own that kind of property. Okay? If it's an old abandoned warehouse that was converted now into all of these apartments, again, you want to avoid that kind of investment in those kinds of properties. You want to stick with, look, you only have a certain amount of time to make as much money as you possibly can with your apartment investing. Okay? So stick with what works. Being in the outer periphery of conversions, I'll call them, okay, is dangerous. Okay? Why are they dangerous? Really two reasons. One is maintenance. Here's what I mean. When a property is not originally built as an apartment property, but then is morphed into all of the wear and tear and daily cares of life that happens in an apartment building, what's going to happen? This, my friend, is going to go through the roof. And it's going to cost you much, much more than you ever thought. And here's the problem. It continues. It continues, typically. It doesn't just spurt and stop. The maintenance cost continues most of the time. So you want to avoid that kind of property. So the old converted home built in 1930, I mean, the numbers a lot of times just look unbelievable. Again, back to the too good to be true story. But once you factor in all of the maintenance an old property like that has, it's just not worth it. So that's the case with that. So maintenance, and I'm also talking maintenance cost with even like converted commercial properties. How many issues do you think you'll have with a converted warehouse property with all sorts of new gyrations being done, retrofitted, refitted in a property like that? Way too many to even bother with. Okay, so don't do it because it's against that maintenance is going to cost a ton of money. All right, so there's that. So I talked to you about maintenance. The other reason, I said there's two reasons, and it's resale. Back to the first, one of the first things we talked about is resale. A garden-style apartment property built as an apartment property is much, much easier to sell. Will sell faster and sell for more money than some kind of a conversion that you've got to now add more story to. You've got to add more information. You've got to now cover so many more bases with this kind of property. Why bother, right? Why bother when the market is just fine with properties that are built as apartment properties? Okay. Big deal. All right, that's a big deal. So avoid that. All right. So let's go. I'm going to cover one more thing. All right. One more thing that what I'm going to cover here is going to be. It's not really what I would say the most important thing, but it's something that not a lot of people think about. It's not the kind of discussion that they have when they're getting into the investment that they should be having, at least with themselves, okay? And here it is. It is, all right, how do I exit? How do I exit? All right, how do I exit this investment? Because here's the bottom line, folks, and I think you'll agree with me on this. It is much easier to get into an investment than it is to get out, right? Now, if you have any experience with multifamily properties, especially apartments, you know that that's the case. And one of the reasons why you usually can get better returns, get better income, get better investment results from a multifamily property is it's not a liquid investment. I mean, my partners can't call me today and say, hey, Darin, I want to liquidate my holdings in the Heartland Flagship Fund today. Please send me a check. Not going to happen. Okay? Because the money's invested in real estate. Okay? So, but the good news is, what my partners know, is they know how they can get out. They know what to do. They know how to do it when, if and when that time comes. Why? Because we've had those discussions. Okay? We've had those discussions. So let's say you're looking at buying your own property. Same thing applies. Okay? So you're buying your own property. It doesn't matter how big it is. So the thing you want to ask yourself as you're going through this is, okay, how am I going to exit out of here? What's my plan in exiting? Now here's the thing you want to avoid. Okay? You don't need a 7-page business plan for this. You don't need 8 sets of spreadsheets. You don't need 7 pages of copy to do it. You just need to have an idea. So, I mean, write the top 3 things down on how you think you're going to exit. Okay, and maybe what time frames. Because what do we know about life? It changes, right? It changes all the time. So, I mean, here's the first way I'm going to exit this investment. Here's the second way, if that doesn't work out. And here's probably the third way. And here's kind of my time frame on what I think. And there you go. It's good enough. Call it a day. You don't need to get the laptop out and charts and graphs. It's not necessary. But you want to be asking and want to know these things. Okay? You want to know these things. Now, there are other things we could have covered here. We could have covered, so when do I get distribution checks, or where should I get my financing, or how should I do inspections? I mean, there's a whole bunch of other things we could cover, and I've got specific videos or even some courses and other information that you can get into to find out those things. But what we wanted to cover today is really the general broad brush items. And the things that I covered today, I think will really help you, especially if you see what I'm seeing. If you see multifamily becoming a fantastic place to put your money, it's really good now. It's a good place to invest your money, regular IRA, 401k. But what we see coming down the road, I think will make it even that much more special. And if you see these things, you see them like I'm doing, all these things that we covered here, and knowing that going in, you just make a hell of a lot more money. It'll be a lot easier, less stress, less worry, and why not have it that way, right? All right. Have a great day. I'm glad you spent time with me going over this information, and we'll talk to you soon. All right. We'll see you.